So a forewarning that these mics are, you're recorded, so if you ask a question, it will be recorded. So watch your language. Well, welcome to Enhancing Your BD Culture from the Inside Out. We are so glad you're here today. One quick thing. We know that a lot of these sessions compete for your attention. So if you find that you're not getting any value out of this session, please go ahead, leave. We won't take offense to it. Go find something that is more your speed or whatever meeting your needs. But there will be a small fee when you leave, just so you know. Okay, so safety first, right? That's the most important thing. We have 2 exits, one in the rear and one to the side of the room. In the event of a water landing, please make sure you take your vest from underneath your seat, put it over your head, wrap the black strap around your waist, and pull the red tab to inflate. Wait till you exit the room before you inflate your vest. Take a good look at the people around you. Some of these people are going to freak out, others might save you, so make friends with everyone. Also, silence your phones. At least pretend like you're not on your phone so that we feel that we're actually doing something up here. Yeah, when somebody's phone rings and then they answer it and leave, it's like, well, I guess that was more important than this presentation. A big thank you to our sponsors. And this is seriously, without the sponsors, it's not possible for us to keep conference costs down so that small businesses like us and like you can attend these things. These things get very expensive. If you don't know how expensive these events cost, ask somebody from Nationals. Ask anybody that's planned a large-scale event. They're very expensive. Presentations are worth credits. It's to the end of the year. You guys are going to have to start turning that in to make sure you keep all your credentials and fancy letters at the end of your name. So make sure you get your badge scanned so that you can get those credits. We prefer to have Q&A at the end of the session. And this is just due to the fact that we will likely answer one of your questions later on in the session or just a couple of sentences into it. So try to keep it to the end. If you get really excited and really fired up and you want to ask us something, then please, by all means, do. If we know that we are right before the networking, we're keeping you from having some drinks with 4,000 of your best friends, so we won't keep you long. We can always continue the conversation in the exhibit hall. And with that said, we are your speakers today. I am Victoria, we have Mindy, we have Carrie Ann. These ladies, actually 2 years ago, was my first small business conference. And their session was the very first session I sat in. And they are highly knowledgeable in business development and strategy and marketing pursuits for small businesses. Mindy actually owns her own small business and helps other small businesses and works for another small business doing strategic marketing and business development. Carrie Ann owns her small business for about 4 years now, and she does the same thing. They are both really passionate about the small business and getting them to where they need to be to be competitive in the marketplace. And I don't know how I sweet-talked my way on this panel. For some reason, they agreed to let me come, but here I am. No, I'm just kidding. I do business development and marketing for a firm that has multiple divisions, so we have a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of different things, and it's really important to keep that internal line of communication, hence the BD, enhancing your BD culture from the inside out. Before we talk about the goals, the one thing we all talked about was everybody has that challenge internally. You all have a story where somebody didn't know something about what your firm did and you missed an opportunity. And that's why we set up this conversation. So I'm going to let Carrie Ann go into our goals for this session and we'll get going.
Thank you, Victoria. She was also wonderful as an MC for JETSI last year, anybody that was there. So we saw how smart she is and her ability to just integrate into the SAME culture right off the bat. Victoria brings a very unique perspective to our conversation today. Mindy and I both have worked in so many different firms, different sizes and different services. So we hope that we are able to share with you all some of the things that we've seen along the way, because as Victoria said, this is not a large business problem or a small business problem, but everyone in firms touches business development It's not one person's job. It's not the business developer's job, it's not the principal's job, it's not the manager's job, but every single person touches a client. In fact, probably you could argue that your project management teams and your delivery teams are actually your most active business developers within a firm, because they're the ones interfacing with the clients and the consultants every single day. And so they're out there in the field, they know what's going on, they know what the client wants, they know what you need to do to deliver, and actually delivering great work is your best business development tool. So part of our job here today is to help draw some connections on how you can integrate within your firm all the different services, all the different personalities, all the different pieces of the company that touch clients, working together so that you can add more value overall to your clients. Most of the time, you're working with one client providing one service, and then another division within your firm might want to do more work with that client. How do we get there? How do we make those strategic introductions? How do we build relationships with the people that we work with every day, and we might not really actually know what they do or the clients that they want to work with? That's one of our goals for you today, is to make sure that you can go back to your companies and start talking with each other and having these strategic conversations. SMPS, the Society for Marketing Professional Services, is another society. They're actually a strategic partner of SAME. They did a study a couple years ago on the Seller-Doer business development model. And is it actually viable? Are firms using it? Do clients want it? How many firms have business development positions? And how many firms just follow this Seller-Doer model? And they found that of the firms that were surveyed, 3/4 of them use this Seller-Doer model. And a lot of that is because the clients do want to meet the people that are going to do their work. The sales job of the business developer is to help integrate and build those relationships, but often they need that Seller-Doer. So we're here today for the Seller-Doers in the room, for the sellers, for just the doers, for the principals, for the owners, for the managers, everybody that goes back to your company that can help integrate these services and integrate the business development functions so that you can then go out and add more value to your clients. We're going to touch on building relationships inside, building relationships outside, what cross-selling is, how you can do it in a meaningful way and add value across your firm, and how to keep in front of your relationships. Relationships are our most important asset in business and in life. So we want to help bring some focus on how you can manage these relationships in a meaningful way.
So what is the Seller-Doer culture? I mean, how many of you know? Seller-Doer culture? Yeah, a lot of you know. The thing with the Seller-Doer culture is, what is it? What is a Seller-Doer culture? Come on, somebody answer. You do both. You sell and you do it. The issue with that is when you start doing your BD efforts, you're focusing externally. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's something to be said on connecting the dots within your company on what you can accomplish. You can get more work if you're connecting with your peers and having them sell your work for you. Pretty easy, right? So one thing, and it's a personal story. So previous firm I was with, we had a session where it was a lunch and learn, where we allowed the client to come in to earn PDHs. And it went really well. We practiced, we did everything really good. On my part, I forgot to update my guys on all the services that we offered within the firm. So at the end, when the client said, you know what, I'm having an issue with some erosion problems. Is that something you guys do? Can y'all do, watershed, some design, whatever? And my division manager actually said, nope, we don't do that. And if I wasn't there, I said, excuse me, actually, yeah, we do. The manager's here, you want to talk to him? He said, yeah, that'd be great. It resulted in more work for a different division, same client, full service. Now, my first thought was, how many times has that happened? And I wasn't there. Nobody was there. Nobody could say, actually, we do that. So that's, again, the importance of when you have the Seller-Doer culture, you're out there selling not just your services, but your entire firm's services. So it's really important to get to know those people, and it's important to get buy-in from the rest of your staff to make sure that they do that. I think I just totally ran over your slide.
Hey, that's all right.
All right,
We can
so
share. It's all about
exactly,
sharing.
connecting the dots.
So Victoria made a great point. In today's competitive environment, business development can't be an individual thing. It has to be collective. And the best way to do that is to make all of your employees business development people. Again, you don't want to go out there and confuse your clients or your potential teaming partners. It's imperative that your message and who you are is clear and concise across the board to, make sure that we're taking advantage of all those opportunities that we get in front of. And our goal is to build business and to provide additional services, right? So we want to make sure we're doing that. So some of the basic things we can do to build internal relationships, or just a few things here. One thing that I feel very strongly about, and I hope you agree, is that we need to bring back water cooler conversation. We don't have conversations anymore. If we do, we're not having meaningful conversations. But what I mean by that is we're not conveying knowledge, perspective, having meaningful discourse where we're figuring out how to look at things differently, or we're listening to learn and engage. What we're doing is we're like, okay, we're trying to think to get to the next thing, right? We're in a reactive society. We don't really have time. We'd rather send a text message or an email than to actually have a conversation. And I think that it is imperative in building these internal relationships that we're sharing organizational and institutional knowledge with one another in a face-to-face conversation. Technology has interrupted this. It's prevented us from learning skills. I know when I started early on, 20-some years ago, I know it's hard to believe, but when I did, I was the biggest sponge on earth. Like, I enjoyed sitting down and talking to people and learning their craft. I didn't know what bridge scour was or some other things, but I learned about it, and the people were excited to share that information. I have a lot of drawings that were sketches on back of napkins, what bridge scour was, or other structural systems and things like that. So I think we desperately need to bring back the art of conversation. There is a tool that I use in some of the training that I do for communications, and that is Celeste Headley's TED Talk on the 10 ways to have a better conversation. Has anybody heard of Celeste in her TED Talk? No?
It's
Check
a
it
good
out.
one. It's a really good one.
It's fantastic. And Celeste is an NPR radio host. She does not have political people or pundits on her show because she wants to have real conversation instead of people talking over her. So it's a great tool. Check it out. We'll include it in a handout that we'll attach to the presentation. It's a great learning tool. So some other things we can do. How many of you have regularly scheduled marketing or business development meetings in your firm? Raise them high. All right, great. This is a great tool for sharing information, and I'm sure that you already are. But one thing that we used to do in our daily meetings, or not daily, I'm sorry, weekly meetings, because that's a lot of meetings, we would always share the pursuits. There was a whole list of all the marketing pursuits, proposals we were chasing, but it also included business development, clients we were meeting with, teaming partners we were looking towards, and forecasting. So we would go back to these projects that we know were in the pipeline, because when we had everybody around that table, it forced conversation, or I should say it scheduled conversation for everybody to talk. And ultimately what would happen in those meetings is somebody knew someone connected somebody, and that's how we kept this momentum going. So I encourage you to use those. Also, what is instrumental in building these internal relationships is creating what I call tag-along opportunities. So when you have younger staff, less experienced staff, find ways to get them into the mix. All too often we find that our senior level people are doing the client presentations, going to the client business development meetings, and we're not including those next generation. This is so imperative for succession planning and getting your clients really comfortable with who the next people are that will be stepping up, because we have an aging workforce and there will be retirement, and there's a lot of young people out there. So we need to be mindful of that. Get them involved in project kickoff and progress meetings. They don't have to play a major role. They're probably not ready to, but if you give them a task, like taking notes, compiling a list of task assignments for the next moving forward. Letting them do introductions, at least giving an opportunity to meet with other people that are in similar roles in those organizations that you're meeting with. And that's how we build this zipper effect. So we're mirroring people at all levels of the organizations with one another. So again, succession planning, other job opportunities, and we'll talk about that more as we go. And again, we'll talk more about platforms for sharing this information. And we all have we have our marketing and business development reports that we share, we have meeting minutes, we have CRM systems, which we'll get into, and other internal platforms. So anyway, these are just basic steps for creating a foundation for building internal relationships. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, and you know, that people are messy, right? Some are super messy. So we can't talk about building internal relationships without talking about different personalities and difficult, I'll say, not as easy people to deal with. We've all faced them. So anyway, we just have to be mindful that people bring all kinds of professional and life experiences with them to the table every time we're working on a project. And it's really important that we navigate how to have conversations with people. So we're mindful of how they best give and receive information. And Victoria's gonna tackle a little more on this.
So it's getting to know your teams. You have challenges. How many of you have encountered somebody that wants absolutely no interest to talk to you about what they're working on, what they're pursuing, or what they are even interested in looking at? Like, I'm sure we've all dealt with that, right? And even when you're talking to your current clients and you're asking them for that introduction to a different department to expand your services in that company, they have zero desire. What's the point for them? What's the value to them? So there's a lot of challenging ways to get to know these people and make those connections. One thing I've usually done is it's a give to get, right? When you give them something, then you make the ask. So constantly trying to do that. And I have a lot of examples, and I'm actually like really having a hard time pinpointing one down, but there's been multiple occasions where it's, hey, I heard this client talked about this, we don't do it, like this group can't do it, maybe your group can do it. When's the next time you're meeting with somebody else? Like, really kind of get that conversation going. I'm sure you guys know most of that, but it's important to always remember that when you're doing this, lead it by example. When you're actually going out and you're selling your services for your specific division or product line, that you're including your other divisions and other product lines, and you're leading by that example. Communications help you from embarrassing situations. If you're actually telling people that you're going to client meetings, again, another example, it's kind of embarrassing when you walk into a meeting and somebody with the exact same logo on the shirt walks out of a meeting and you have this exchange of, well, I didn't know you were going to be here. It's happened, and I'm sure it's happened to some of you. I see faces in the audience that are like, oh yeah, that one time and that guy. So it's really important to try to build those relationships with those difficult personalities, and there's many different ways to do that, but you really have to find what makes that person tick. What do they care about? So that's more along the lines of the knowing your team's personalities.
Yes, or we talked about the other day, knowing how to speak to them. This could be internal or external. And Mindy mentioned their communication style. I mean, not everybody's going to embrace someone new. Not everyone's going to embrace building a new relationship with somebody in the firm. A good friend of mine has a small business that was just acquired by a very large company. And they have several divisions. All of them have vice presidents in charge of these various divisions. And he's trying to integrate himself into these other groups so that they can cross-pollinate and do exactly what we're trying to talk about today. How do we do business together and add more value and learn what each other does so that we can figure it out? Also, his group, the company that was purchased, was more of a commercial-facing entity purchased by a business-to-government entity. So there's a lot of integration that really needs to happen because they really can't see some alignment.
They didn't see the value.
They don't see value. They don't understand exactly why would my clients want to work with you. You're an advertising agency. They do so much more. Anyway, he's been calling on a lot of his peers, but they're all former military. He is not. And they don't see value in going to drinks with him after hours. And so how does he make that ask? And Victoria says, what do you call it, mandatory fund.
Well, yeah, you gotta know the terminology. You gotta know the culture. It's just like any one of us that are going into working in the federal market. You've got to be aware of the culture and some of the terminology. So that's what he called me. I would say, well, it's mandatory fund. You have to go. That's not an option.
So building relationships with difficult personalities takes some persistence within your organization. But like Victoria said, adding that value, knowing their lingo, bringing them something that they can then reciprocate and start to see what those collaborative opportunities are. It just takes a lot of trial and error until you figure out what makes that person tick and how that person's going to interact with you and your team.
So Mindy's going to tell us about how to establish some internal cross-selling programs.
Okay, the first thing with internal cross-selling programs is we need to kind of really look at the benefits of it and the long-term vision for it. So as marketing professionals, we tend to look at big picture, long-term impacts of the campaigns that we employ or the programs and processes that we develop. So a lot of the benefits that I'm going to discuss kind of take this into consideration and look at this in a multifaceted long-term vision. So since we're all pressed for time and we're doing more with less, it's sometimes nice when we can develop campaigns or programs that layer other benefits to them. So one of the first benefits of establishing a cross-selling program internally is that it educates your employees. So it provides them with a firm history, a taste of the culture of the firm. It helps them to sell and give accurate information to their clients and teaming partners. And it's also a great tool for new hire orientation. So we want to make sure that we are also shaping the client and teaming partner perception. So through internal programs, we can provide the language that we want our employees to use and how we talk about ourselves. So you're giving them the tools and the language to use when they go out and they talk to other potential clients or teaming partners, or even internally, how they can reinforce the language internally so it becomes second nature as opposed to, oh my gosh, how do I talk about the firm today to this person? And it builds a little confidence as well. So consistency is key in that. One thing it helps, how many of you firms have gone from huge names to acronyms? Or do you have a firm like at ARIA Environmental, some people refer to us as AE, some AEI, some ARIA, some, Michelle's firm, whatever it may be. But it's how we talk about ourselves and how we reinforce that name that builds that consistency. It holds your brand promise, and it makes people feel confident about how they're talking about the firm. So keep that in mind. The other caveat to that is that's an acronym or the name of the firm, but how do we talk about our services to certain clients? So one of ARIA's clients is Howard County Public Schools. Well, my whole life with Michelle's firm, I've talked about indoor air quality is a service that we provide, but Howard County Public Schools calls it indoor environmental quality, which I really want them to change that because it makes my life difficult when I'm talking to Howard County people or I'm submitting proposals for them. So that's just something to keep in mind. And also in firms too, is it civil engineering or is it site engineering? Is it land surveying or is it surveying? So it's really important about how we talk about ourselves, our firms, and the services that we provide. So we want to be mindful in that. Having these internal benefits of these internal programs is that you really increase your marketable service offerings. So when people know what your firm does overall, all the facets, when they sit in front of people, they're able to educate, again, other people, clients, teaming partners, about what the firm does. This can only expand service offerings, it can increase your portfolio, build a broader, better portfolio, and also increase billable time. And then it naturally creates stronger pursuit strategies. So when you're going after certain work, you already know in the back of your head who can perform the work, what services we offer, what we need to subcontract, what we can retain in-house. So those are some of the benefits. In terms of tools that you can use for this, the first and foremost I have to say is that culture plays a huge part here. So the company culture has to support a business development environment within the firm. It must be mandated and approved from the top, because we are going to use some non-billable hours to meet with clients and other teaming partners and also build our internal staff. So you're going to have to dedicate a few non-billable hours to that. It just has to become incorporated into the culture and what you do. So there's a great slide that we use in some of our training for this from David Meister. He's a Harvard professor, and he wrote a book on managing the professional services firm. And it says, what a group does with its billable time determines its income for the year. What it does with its non-billable time determines its future. So I'm going to post that as well, because I think it's really important when people struggle against the billable versus non-billable time. So that billable time that everybody's working on is what's happening now, but you have to be concerned in managing what you're going to have in the future as well. All right. So some of the tools you can use to build this program. I'm going to go into a case study. But real quick, lunch is a great avenue, right? You get 1 hour of non-billable time free for you to use and teach your employees, build their business development skills. How many here, somebody leaves food in the kitchen, how fast is it gone? Right? You know, engineers and architects are big eaters. So use that to your advantage. And if you can pay for lunch or have them bring their own, that's fine. It gets people's attention and their willingness to participate. The other thing is to have a presentation outline, have something that these groups need to talk to. So the idea is to have each department talk about itself and what it does. So have a thorough presentation outline available. Marketing should assist with this. They can help guide the best projects, things that are coming down the pipeline. They also are very aware and tied into any strategic planning or marketing efforts, so they can help with that. Coaching and practice is another benefit here, a tool that you'll use. Marketing can work with your departments on these presentations. It's great coaching for younger staff and older staff to practice presentation skills for when they're up in front of clients and for project interviews. And then I suggest a shared department overview handout, 1 page just listing top clients, top services, a little matrix of who's credentialed or registered, for a quick reference. So this is something you want people to be able to pull out and be like, if you're on the phone with a client, you can say, oh yeah, we do that. And okay, this is the person you talk to. Or if they're sitting down for a proposal strategy session, they're able to see who has what and what credentials are. And that's more important now more than ever. And then finally, it's not worth its weight unless you provide some real connection points to share. So you also want to have some sharing of information like, hey, these are the clients I feel like you can work with. Here are some of the new trends and technologies that they're employing. And, we're going to work with you to build more. Do we go to the case study?
So one interesting comment that somebody said yesterday, how many of you reviewed your own company websites before you came to SBC? So a couple. I was having a conversation with somebody in the exhibit hall, and they goes, somebody asked me, can you tell me more about this service that you offer? And they're like, we don't do that. And they go, oh, well, that's on your website. I checked it out before I came. So that's kind of embarrassing. So it's those little things that we often forget that, check out your own website, see what you're saying to people, because I think that's one of the last things that most companies forget to update is their website, because it's out of sight, out of mind. It's out there, but we forget everybody else is looking at it. We're just not looking at it. So make sure that that's up to date. Again, if you have people with credentials, put it out there and make sure it's up to date and correct. So that's just a little side story.
I like it. Thank you. So I wanted to give a case study of an example. I've instituted cross-selling programs in a large business and also scaled it down to a small business. So just real quick, I worked with a firm. It's a 230-person firm, headquartered in Baltimore, did work all up and down the East Coast, across the country, had 4 branch offices, 2 in Pennsylvania, 1 in West Virginia, and 1 in Northern Virginia. It was full architecture, engineering, and construction, and it had 16 disciplines, all disjointed, operating as individual companies, trying to be under one umbrella. It was kind of a crazy time. So in 2007, on the heels of a strategic planning session, we decided to rebrand. which spawned the firm's internal cross-selling program. And it's something I was very proud of because it was so needed and it helped us immensely, and I will share some of the return on that as well. So what we did is we went to each department and we asked them, marketing assisted them in preparing a presentation where they would share their top 3 to 5 clients, the credentials of their staff in a matrix form, market sectors that they operated in with the top 1 to 2 projects in each, their forecasted projects for the next 12 to 18 months, and also any new trends or technologies that they're employing. And this is kind of on the heels of BIM, like BIM being introduced. So it was a lot of like, who's using it, how are you doing it, what clients are asking for it. So it was really important at the time. And then also a real solid list of where do you see me working with your department, or what clients can I introduce you to, or what skill sets do you have that maybe we need to gather in our department as well. So it opened this door because everybody's so busy and working. And remember, prior to the recession in 2009, everybody was fat and happy and work was rolling in and we just didn't even think about it, right? So this really pushed our department heads and their group, and they worked on it together to really think about strategically where they're going, what they can provide. And it also helped fill those HR holes, like who do we need to fill these roles that are being requested in these RFPs? What skill sets do we need? Do we need people versed in BIM moving forward? Those types of things. So we got that off the ground. We started to schedule. We had 16 disciplines, so we tried to cram them all in 1 year. We didn't want to fatigue people, but we also we knew the importance of getting it off the ground. So we did 2 every month. We did the first week, we'd have one group come in. The last week of the month, we'd have somebody else. And we just kind of kept going on that same day, same lunch. It was provided. We had kind of a dessert challenge. So each department kind of got into who could have the best dessert available for people, which got pretty funny, but it's good to, build some fun around things, right? So anyway, by the end of December 2008, so we implemented this, it was July of 2007. By the end of December 2008, we could directly appropriate about $950,000 just to increase revenue based on this cross-selling program. And adding on services, increasing that. But we further grew as the program moved on. And what was happening is now we were providing a full complement of services to some of our clients, and our teaming partners were not just using us for civil engineering, but now they were adding us on for structural, landscape, surveying. So you can see how this can really grow and boom. So it was very exciting for us. And because we had architecture, engineering, construction, it added even more venues for us to add on teams or add on services. So it also enabled us to enter new markets that some of these groups weren't even participating in. So for example, we did a lot of Maryland Department of Transportation work. So they knew us as one arm of us was transportation, traffic, and bridge structures. But when they began using us and the facilities contracts would come out, they're like, oh, well, here we love working with this firm. Now we can use their architects, building structures, civil. So you see where I'm going there. But the best thing was that we targeted our best clients, and those are the best clients that are easy to work with, have solid processes, that they pay on time, right? Because that's important, and really good multipliers, and real good opportunity to bring in all levels of expertise. So those were some of the benefits of doing it on that cross-selling program. It was very successful and it continues to be successful. So if you're a small business, it's scaled. So when I went to ARIA Environmental and instituted the same type of program, instead of doing department presentations, we're a group of 9 industrial hygienists. We took our market sector leads. So those in charge of our healthcare, federal government sector, education, commercial, all presented. And then our president did all the niche stuff, some of the cool things we do, like lab decommissioning and shipbreaking and crumb rubber studies and Legionella, all that fun stuff. So they were in charge of that real niche stuff, and it just blossomed. Like, we know how to talk about our clients. It's a small firm, but man, everybody's on point when they answer that phone and can field those questions. So again, something I strongly recommend building in your firms.
Yeah, and having a scalable program, and one of the conversations that I've been having with folks all week since I've been here, with the speaker tag on, everybody wonders what you're speaking about. And I say, we're talking about internal seller-doer processes and how to build a culture around business development. And everybody's excited about this topic because it's part of every firm. Every firm needs it, whether you're super large or super small. Like I said before, it's not just one person's role, and it's not something that you can do in a vacuum. It has to be integrated, and you have to be able to call your colleague and talk to them about an issue that your client is having. And what better value then are we adding to our clients if I can call Mindy and say, you're an expert in this and my client needs it. How am I, what can we do to solve this problem? Whether she's billable on the project or not, but we have a relationship to be able to bring something new to that client. And it's going to help us innovate. I don't know who all attended this morning's keynote session, but I was there and early because I didn't stay out too late last night. Looking at you. But she talked about innovation and why are the small businesses the ones that are innovating and not the largest businesses, not the Department of Defense. And I think they're innovating in their own ways, but the small businesses are the ones that are able to be nimble, and it's because they're integrated. They're all there working on the same mission, and they're bringing their skill sets and they're capitalizing on each other's skill sets so that they're creating new and different ways of doing things from the ways that we've always done them before. And I think our profession is probably a little bit behind some of the others in terms of technology, adapting to these innovations. But we want to make sure that we leave you today with some great ideas on how to build and engage your network inside the firms and outside the firms. And I think sales and sell become taboo words in the engineering community. None of us want to be selling anything. So I would pose to you that it's a mindset shift. That it's your mindset that you're feeling it while you're here. You're always on, you're representing your firm, you're representing your brand, you're trying to figure out how you can collaborate with these people that you just met. Is there a connection that we have? Is there not? Do I need to go across the room and talk to somebody else? You're just constantly thinking and constantly trying to figure out how all these puzzle pieces get together. But when you're back at your office and you sit down to make a call, or you're on LinkedIn and you want to reach out to a former colleague because they're now at a new firm, but you haven't talked in 3 years, and isn't that embarrassing? And now I'm calling you because you're here, and I didn't talk to you for the last couple of years. It's a mindset thing. It's all about getting yourself in the mindset that you're not selling somebody something. You're calling them to bring them something. They have something that you need. None of us receive an RFP and say, oh yeah, we can do all this work, but I don't want to be salesy. I'm not going to put that proposal together. We want to show our clients how we can respond to this RFP because we're bringing them value. We are better at this than anybody else, or at least as good as the other 5 firms that are submitting. So thinking that way as we're reaching out person to person through the phone, through email, through LinkedIn, through events like this, how are we bringing somebody something that they need, or we're just reaching out to connect. We're not always calling to make an ask. We talked about this yesterday too, that often at events like this, we have these great social relationships, even though we're a professional society, and often we never end up working together. But we come to these events, we see each other, and 3 years later, we're like, what is it that you do again? But we have a great time at the networking events. So how do we, trying to continue to build those relationships at all layers. So there's the social aspect and the professional aspect. A few years ago here at this conference, we had a speaker named David Noor. He wrote a book called Relationship Economics, and I thought he was phenomenal. And I've read all of his books and I listened to his videos. He has a theory that you can well, I guess I should ask the question first. How many people have more than 500 LinkedIn connections? Awesome, so many of you are managing your LinkedIn better than I do. But he has a theory that you can really only manage 150 relationships at any given time. And as we were preparing for this session, I told...
I can only manage 10.
Sounds like high school.
150 is phenomenal. And if you think about all the relationships in your life, you have your family, you have your coworkers, then you have your clients, then you have your network, then you have your church family, your college friends, your high school friends. 150 gets full really fast. And so if you try to, I was telling them yesterday I was preparing for another presentation, and I had coffee with the gentleman that was putting together the panel, and we were already connected on LinkedIn, and neither of us could remember where we met or how we met each other, and it was my financial advisor that made an introduction. She said, you need to have coffee with Andrew. So we sat there, we pulled up LinkedIn, we're like, oh, we're already connected. And this is embarrassing. How do we not know each other? If someone had called me on and said, you're connected to Andrew, can you make a strategic introduction for me? I could not have picked up the phone and done that. I would not have been adding value to either person, and it would have been, again, highly embarrassing. I'm using LinkedIn as an example because it's the easiest and it's very clearly dear to me. But it's one of those things where you accepting contacts from people that you don't know or that you don't know well or that aren't really part of your network, you're not going to really build a relationship with them, and you're not ever going to be able to make those connections. And one of the tips that we have is asking for those strategic contacts, asking folks that you know that are in another organization or an organization that you want to be in with a little bit more for a strategic introduction. A lot of our businesses grow on referrals and word of mouth, and asking for a referral or asking for that introduction are all part of that process. Some other ideas are, connecting without wasting time. When we all get home from this conference, we've got stacks and stacks of business cards. I would argue that there's 4,000 people here. If you leave with 20 business cards that you absolutely have to follow up with immediately, then you've got quality contacts that you've made. Your time here has been very valuable. So you've got quality over quantity. If you go back with 400 business cards, how many of those are you ever going to really do business with? How many of them are you even going to remember? A good friend of mine does a lot of sales training, and he has a whole system for his business card organization, and I love to share it with people. So when he's in an event, prior to going to the event, he already knows when he's going to follow up with people. So he's got time scheduled if he were here for next week or for the following week. If it's a normal networking event, he'll ask for it the next day and say, or if it's a Tuesday, a Thursday, he'll have time blocked on his calendar. So when he meets you and he's having a great conversation, then there's a time, he knows that there's an opportunity that you should connect further. He'll say, great, can I call you at 10 o'clock on Thursday? And your card goes in this pocket. He has a lot of pockets. He's able to say, okay, so then he's got time, now you know, and he's able to follow up on his promise right away because he's already got the time blocked that he's going to make these phone calls. If he's having a conversation with you and it's clear that there's probably no potential business ever to be done, but you're a great person that he might connect with someone else, you go in this other pocket. And then if you're somebody that's, nope, not at all, this is never going to connect, we're just not a fit, you go in the back pocket, and when he gets home, that goes in the recycling. But no one knows that he's doing this magic trick.
Now when you run across them, they'll know.
But he now has a system, so he can really work on nurturing these relationships that are in his front pocket. And those are the ones that he can then build and grow into his 150 relationships.
I think from an internal standpoint, it's when I personally meet people that I want to connect within my firm, I don't just hand that relationship off, or I don't just connect them right away. It's more of a, okay, well, I talked to you, let me follow up with you, let me connect you with somebody internally, and then it also ends there. How many times do we actually have an opportunity to make a connection for somebody else within our organization, and then we follow up on it? And that's part of the whole taking the time and doing it, because that's the only way you're going to get buy-in from others to do it for you. So, sorry, just had to throw that in there.
That's excellent.
Oh, I think I missed that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did that.
So we do want to.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No. Yeah, so navigating through organizations, I think we've alluded to it several times. A lot of organizations have a lot of different branches, a lot of different departments, and our firms do too. Even Mindy mentioned a 9-person firm that has 3 different divisions and 5 different market sectors. They don't always cross-pollinate. And so if someone is the commercial side is doing business with her company and they don't know that they also do healthcare, and then they move to a healthcare profession, they need to make that introduction again and say, oh, by the way, now you're in healthcare. Did you know we've been doing Johns Hopkins for the last 10 years? Those are the kind of things you can't just make one update and then think that everybody remembers. So I think it was you yesterday that was saying keeping top of mind is really an important thing. Mm-hmm. So you trying to not always be the last person in the room, because as I was talking to somebody earlier today, there's a difference between being persistent and being a pest. So you balancing that, if there is a fine line, but always making sure that the folks that you really need to build those relationships with are on your radar, and that you are consistently following up with them, and being able to ask for those strategic introductions so that you are able to get in front of the people that you need to, or make the introductions within your own firm to the folks that they need to meet. And then,
So this, again, goes back to the whole being a connector, leading that charge and actually being the connector for others. There's been several discussions and talks that I've heard over the years that have alluded to the fact that, well, not alluded, they flat out said, like, if you give, you get a lot more in the long run. I think the Small Business Conference last year, the Fellows meeting, they had a speaker on small businesses, and that's what she said. She said, if you are going out and you're helping others, it's going to come back to you. Inevitably, it's just going to. So again, being that connector internally, it's a little bit of both. It's the organizational chart. I often get asked, oh, do you know such and such? I think they work for you now. So going back to that, knowing everybody within your firm, so that way you can talk to that client or talk to that teaming partner and have an in already. Your current relationships outside with clients is valuable. You already have that relationship built. So it's being able to monopolize that and give it to your other departments so that you can monopolize on their current relationships. I'm pretty sure most of you know that, but it's that reminder to make sure you're always doing that.
yeah. Another SMPS research study indicated that for seller-doers, almost everybody spends time working on new and existing relationships simultaneously, and they are, only 5% of seller-doers spend time working exclusively on new relationships, and only 4% are exclusively working on existing relationships. So there's always that constant push and pull of connecting with who you know and who you need to know, and keeping those the existing relationships in place, building on those, adding more value by introducing new services or introducing new folks within your firm, and then continuing to build new and nurture at events like this, where we're continuing to build that network.
Actually, at events like this is my favorite time to get to know my own people. I learn about things that we're doing that I never knew before. So if taking that time to spend in your booth next to your own guys listening to what they're doing, that's always been really beneficial for me, and I feel like you learn a lot more that way, just face to face. It's the only way I have made it these past 2 years.
And actually, my first SAME conference, I went with a teaming partner that my firm had a JV with, and I was fairly new to the firm at the time, and I learned more about what my company did by listening to him talk about us and our JV partnership than I did having been in the firm for 3 months.
Right. So, critical conversations always.
Well, we're about at our mark. We were going to briefly talk about some CRM tools, but we're actually going to include a handout in the presentations where you can download them. That's going to talk about some CRM tools and the pros and cons, and a couple of other items that correlate with CRM. I know some of us have it. It's a good idea because everybody keeps spreadsheets on their desktop, and you don't know what you don't know. So if I can't get to your desktop, then obviously I'm not going to know the people you know. So those are really beneficial. I'm pretty sure a lot of people understand the benefits of a CRM tool.
As long as it's used, whether it's a spreadsheet, a database.
It's only as good as the data you put into it. So if you don't put anything into it, it's not worth it. Do we have any questions? Whoops. No questions?
It's happy hour.
Yes.
So in our firm, when we do our annual planning, we target the numbers of what percentage of the work is cross-selling within our organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if in any of your firms you do that, and if you incentivize that differently than organic work to what you usually do.
I haven't encountered that.
So we're supposed to repeat the question. So the question
Oh,
was.
you don't have a mic, so we have to repeat the question first.
The
Sorry.
question was about incentivizing cross-selling.
And tracking it.
And tracking it. So, yeah, Mindy and I both worked in firms that ended up doing that. And similar to Mindy's story about developing a seller-doer culture, the firm that I was with that did this successfully had restructured and reorganized, and they went from having 52 P&Ls to having 6. And so therefore, we had to really collaborate a lot more together. And that was at that point that they also set up this incentivizing structure. And sometimes it was hard because internally, our geotech guys were way more expensive than some of our small business partners. And so there was a lot of pushback on how are we going to win work if we have to give it to our internal guys and they're twice as much. So then there was a lot of, I think it was at this firm that we ended up doing it at the billing rate, or just the flat rate, and not the billing rate, so that division wasn't making the profit on it. So I think, it depends on your firm culture and how you do your financing, but there was incentive for the business then, for the division that brought in the business that then, as following the example, sub to the geotech internally, there was incentive to them to do that, and vice versa. So they did that, and it became successful. I don't know the stats, Mindy does, because I don't know them, but I think that's a way that a lot of firms use that.
That's
as
a good
tool.
question, though. How many of you do that? How many of you track internal cross-selling?
You will after today,
Charlie.
right? So one thing I'll add is part of what we did after we instituted the cross-selling program is it became part of the performance review too. And it was because we were creating this seller-doer culture, so we wanted everybody to be part of it. One of the things is we developed 2 tracks working with HR. One was a technical track for advancement, and one was a leadership track. So anybody in the leadership track needed to belong to a professional organization, acquire a board position or a committee chair position, and also track how they were building the companies in terms of profitability and expanded market sectors. So what happened was, because not everybody's a natural salesperson, for lack of a better word, or not comfortable doing business development, and they don't want anything to do with it. So this other track that we developed was a technical track. So these are the people that really just wanted to be engineers or architects and hone their craft, and they came into a management role. So they were coordinating projects and doing all the internal work that needed to be done, and making sure QA/QC was in place, and training the younger staff and guiding them in how to program or to build projects. So that was one benefit of doing it, and acknowledging that there are 2 different types of people. Not everybody wants to be in that leadership role, but if they were, then the selling portion and the business development was vital to moving forward.
Do we have another question? Yes.
I was wondering if you could touch a little bit about the factor of likability. For example, a friend of mine is in the insurance company business, and basically there's a lot of research out there that says people do not sue doctors that they like. So they actually do a lot of training in medical school now, and the insurance companies do it themselves to teach doctors better bedside manners and how to say your name when they walk in the door and things like that. So I wondered if you could just touch a little bit on likability in this seller-doer role and how that is a trait.
Well, I think I can share one thing that when I was in 7th grade, I was in band, and I wanted to play the clarinet, and the instructor said, call my mom, the music instructor called my mom and said, please, you got to get Mindy out of band because it's like beating a dead horse, right? So the people that aren't good at something, you shouldn't force them into something they don't want to be forced. But in terms of likability, you really need, that's your brand, right? That's the brand you're building. It's built around your culture, who you are, your value propositions, your mission statements. So it's, the human element of your company, so to speak. So in terms of likability, if you build a strong brand and it's rooted in the principles of the company and it's shared consistently across the board, you'll up that likability. We all know firms that we love to work with, and it's the people, and it's what they stand for and the culture of that firm, how they run their business, how they interact with others, if they're fair, right? So those are all things to take into consideration.
So I've done this before, and it's really strategic about who you're going to send to meet a client, and it's, again, knowing your internal staff. So if, for example, at my old firm, I would do a lot of research, AKA internet stalking, on clients to say, okay, well, what do they care about? What are they interested in? Okay, I want you to take this young engineer because he went to the same school or he grew up in that area or whatever. And knowing those little things about your staff, you can take them to their meeting and make that quick connection to make them likable. And then they're going to associate them with your brand, which gives you a little bit of a leg up. So it's just knowing those little things really pays off in the long run. We are pretty strategic at my current firm. We're pretty strategic about who we take to meetings. We don't just take people to take people. We want to make sure that there's going to be a good connection there and there's going to be a good conversation. So, and that's for meeting, teaming partners. That's meeting clients. That's any of those things. That's definitely something that we've done. So I emphasize on getting to know your people in the littlest ways. Actually, another story. One of my old bosses went to a meeting, and it was for a potential RFP that was coming out. It was a city-county thing, and came back, and they were talking about it, and the guy in the next cube said, hey, that guy lives down the road from me. I've known him since I was a kid. It's like, dude, if I had known that, I would have taken you, and that would have been our in. So it's just those little things that if you say, hey, I'm going to meet these guys, do you know them? Does anybody know them? It really can have some surprising results. I know it sounds really easy, doesn't it? I was like, any other questions? I thought I saw another hand back there. No? Well, thank you guys for coming today. I really hope you guys got something out of it. We are here all evening for questions, jokes, and other types of entertainment. No, I'm just kidding. So let us know. And again, thank you.